All right, so in this first lecture on kinship, we're going to talk about kinship from an evolutionary perspective. And admittedly, if you took this class from somebody else, you might get a different lecture here. But I did a stint as an evolutionary anthropologist, and sometimes I think it's really important to reflect on not only how kinship works culturally, but kind of why it came about, and why having kin or deciding that some people are related to you and trying to help them have children or raise their children is really important to the development of this bipedal primate that we like to call humans. So, kinship is a culturally defined system that defines the rights and obligations that you have to the people you are related to. It defines who you're related to and who you aren't related to. Your kinship system, of course, includes people who are genetically related to you, which we like to call sanguinal kin. It's a fancy Latin word for blood-related kin. And it also includes people that are not genetically related to you, your affinal kin, your affines. Kinship, like marriage, is another cultural universal, meaning that every culture on the planet has some form of a kinship system, and typically this also means that the kinship systems that different cultures have, are widely variable, right? So everybody has some concept of it, but it's really variable from one culture to the next. So kin systems define the relationships you have with kin. It provides a system of mutual aid for those in the system, right? So if my brother asks me to babysit his kids, I'm probably going to do that, right? Because I'm genetically related to those kids, and their evolutionary success is effectively my evolutionary success, right? Or at least partly. I'm related to them, so them passing on their genes helps me pass on my genes effectively, right? It defines inheritance of goods and titles along with marriage. And this is especially true if there is ascribed status, meaning that there is inherited status, that you can be the queen because your mother was queen, or that you can be a noble because your father and mother were both nobles, things like that. And like marriage, it mandates who takes care of and who teaches children. Though this isn't in your textbook, kinship provides an easy method to keep track of who you share genetic material with, right? Because evolutionary theory posits that I should help people who are genetically related to me. If I myself don't have children, then I should help my niece and nephew because they share genetic material with me, right? So basically, what kinship does is makes it such that you don't have to go, okay, well, how related to you every time you think about helping somebody or not, right? So if my niece and nephew ask me for help, I do it. If some random kid out on the street asks me for help, maybe I will, maybe I don't have time, right? If my brother asks me for help, I'm going to help him. If a random person down the street asks me for help, maybe I will, maybe I won't, right? So it's a quick way to figure out who you should help and who you shouldn't. Now, we're not actually thinking about, okay, well, I'm trying to win the evolutionary game, so I'm going to help people related to me. But if you think about it, if we had a group of people, these people don't exist anymore, who have a kinship system, and we have a hypothetical group of people who don't, right? Because the group that has the kinship system knows who to help, they will outlast and out reproduce, produce more quality offspring than the group that has no sense of kinship system, right? So if there was a group of primates, if there was a group of humans that didn't have a kinship system, evolutionarily they probably outperformed those that did not, right? So kinship is helpful in that it allows you to know who to help, right? If you want your genetic material out into the world, as evolutionary theory posits we all do, right? So ultimately, kinship systems allow you to organize people into two groups: kin and non-kin. People you should help, and people that maybe you should help, right? Within your kin, too, kinship allows you to rank and understand the importance of the relationships between you and your kin, right? In most kinship systems, you will find that you should be culturally closer to those that are more genetically related to you. So, for instance, if my brother asked me to babysit his children on the same night that my second cousin asked me to babysit his children, which one am I going to babysit? My brother's children. Now, in reality, I might group all the children into one place and babysit them all at the same time, but if I could only do one or the other, I'm probably going to help my brother's children. And it turns out that I'm more genetically related to my brother's children than my second cousin's children, right? And so evolutionary theory posits that I should help them anyway. right? So even though it's draconian to think about, your kinship system also says, okay, you should be closer to your brother, your sister, your mother, your father than you are to your cousin, and even closer to them than you are to your second cousins, and certainly closer to all these people that are family than you are to people who aren't family, right? We don't often think about that, but it does. Kinship systems allow you to rank your kin. So anthropologists have come up with a series of symbols that people use to make kinship charts. And kinship charts are insanely important to anthropologists. So we represent males as triangles, females as circles. Those of non-binary gender, I have decided, should be represented by squares. I don't think there's been an anthropological decision on that, but I'm going to go with squares. An equal sign means that two people are married to each other. And every time you make a kinship chart, you have to specify one person, male, female, non-binary, it doesn't matter, who is ego. Right? And the reason for that is actually pretty subtle, but you always have to make a kinship chart from somebody's point of view, right? So if I was to tell you about my family, I would say I have one brother, his name is whatever, and I have a mom and a dad, right? But anytime you talk about your kin, you're referencing yourself as well, because if my nephew told you about his family, he would call my brother his dad, right? So you're always referencing the relationship between the two of you when you talk about your kin. So you have to specify when you're making a kinship chart whose perspective you're telling the story from. So on the top right there, you have what brother and sister would look like, and from in the bottom right there, you have what an immediate family would look like. So if you all can, take a few minutes, make your own kinship diagram for your own family. Feel free to drop those in the general discussion if you're willing to do that, like take a picture with your cell phone or make it on your computer, or email it to me and I'll take a look at it. Just so you can try to get the hang of it. It's a really important thing for anthropologists to do. We've spent a lot of time making these things. For you all, you can't switch with somebody and have them check it, but if you want to throw it up in the general discussions area, that would be great, and then other people could look and say, hey, ask you questions about your family. That would be a great kind of extracurricular thing for you to do. So feel free to do that. If you want to send them to me, that would be great. If you want to send them to each other or post them in the discussion board, that would be great as well. So an evolutionary theorist by the name of Hamilton posited that you are more likely to help your kin than any other people. Evolutionarily speaking, this is a good choice, of course, right? Because you want more genetic material like your own out in the world. And he put forward a mathematical formula, and we'll take a quick look at it, but keep in mind it's theoretical. It's not something you actually run through the math of. So Hamilton's rule states that essentially you can find out on average how related to you another person is. Normally, when teaching a person, I would show you on the board how to do this, but let's run through it. On average, you are approximately 50% related to your brother or your sister, right? Because you got 25% of the same material from your mom and 25% of the same material from your dad. So on average, you're 50% related to your brother, your sister, your mother, and your father. Therefore, a uncle that you are related to, you would be 25% related to, and any of their children, you would only be 12.5% on average related to. So you're only 12.5% related to your cousin. If your cousin had children, you would only be 6.25% related to them. Does everybody get it? I'm not going to test you over this math. It's just theoretical anyway. So this is one of the things that Hamilton is kind of doing to figure out his formula. So Hamilton posits that you are likely to do something when R, the genetic relatedness of the recipient to the person, the actor, times B, the additional reproductive benefit of the act, is greater than C, the reproductive cost of the act. All this fancy math that you would never use the formula basically says if the effort and the closeness of the relationship to the person you are going to help is greater than the cost, you should help that person. Right? Does that make sense? So for my brother, right, if the cost was 1, he is 50% related to me, so the benefit to him is 0.5. If that is greater than the cost, I will do it. Nobody actually uses this math. Nobody actually runs this formula. It's just a theoretical model. And all this math and random numbers mean is that you should help people that are related to you as long as the cost is not too great. right? Lots of fancy math, very simple rule. You should help people as long as the cost isn't too great, and you consider how related they are to you when deciding whether to help them or not, right? Pretty easy in the end. So anthropologists talk about two different types of kin. Your affinal kin, those who are related to you by marriage, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, non-blood uncles, non-blood aunts. Remember, some of the people you call uncle and aunt actually aren't genetically related to you. So if a woman marries your blood-related uncle, they are still your aunt, even though they are not genetically related to you, and vice versa. If a man or woman or someone marries your aunt and you are not blood-related to them, they are still your uncle or your aunt, but you're not genetically related to them either. Stepbrothers and sisters. A lot of students will add really close family friends. That's certainly true as well. If you consider that person family and they aren't genetically related to you, then in my opinion, they are your affinal kin. Sanguinal kin, or blood kin, are kin who you share a genetic relationship with. Your brothers, your sisters, fathers, mothers, grandparents, blood-related uncles, blood-related aunts, and cousins. Right? These people you are genetically related to, they are your sanguinal, fancy Latin word for blood, blood-related relatives. So here is an example of a kinship chart, and I want to point out a few interesting things about it. So the first thing you should look at when you look at a kinship chart is, where is the ego? And we find out that the ego is this guy in the center here, right? And we can learn quite a bit of the ways, or quite a few ways, that this culture's kinship pattern is different from ours simply from this chart, right? So here is ego, and then this person we would call their mother. They refer to this person as Uba. And we go over here, and Uba simply means parent, right? So they would call their father parent and their mother parent. Interesting. So let's take a look at this person over here. This is their Uta, and we go over here and we find out that Uta means aunt or uncle. Boop. And here. Interesting. So what we can find out real quick is that in the generation above them, they don't care about gender at all. Right? You're my aunt, uncle, you're my, effectively you're my parent, and you're the sibling of my parent. Right? Or married to, well, nope, there's a difference there. You're my parent or the sibling of my parent. Right? But let's check out this person over here. We find out something interesting by looking at what they call this person. So instead of saying sibling of my parent, they say Ange, sibling of my parent. Right? So it's married in. Person who married the sibling of my parent. Right? So they care less about gender than we do, but they do specify whether they are genetically related to their uncle or aunt or not. Right? Whether they are married in or whether they are actually blood related. So let's take a look at egos, sisters, and brothers. So what we have here is 3 different titles for their sisters and brothers. Again, this doesn't vary based on gender. Instead, these titles vary based on age. So we look over here, we find out that Uja means older sibling, Ija means younger sibling, and Aja means twin. So again, they don't care about the gender of their siblings, but what they do care about is birth order. So there must be something based on inheritance or respect that is really important as to whether that person is older or younger than them, or the same age. Right? So they really care about birth order. They don't really care about gender as much as we do. Let's see, what else can we learn? Other important things are this Ange prefix can be used to indicate anybody married in. So effectively, you call the person who married someone related to you, person married to that person. Right? So in this case, Ange Uda over here simply means person married to my sibling who is older than me. Ange Uja, person married to the sibling who is older than me. Right? Whereas regardless of their age, we would call that person brother-in-law or sister-in-law. So here are the things we learned simply by looking at this chart. We don't know the language, but some anthropologists made this chart for us. We have learned that they don't care about gender as much as we do. We're a very gendered society here in Western society, or North America and Europe. They do care about birth order, which we kind of do. Like when I introduce people to my brother, I say, hey, this is my older brother, but it's not like super important that he's older than me. They seem to care about that a lot. And they specify when somebody is married into the family and somebody is not. And then when they are married in, they only name them by saying that this is my brother's sibling or brother's married spouse would be the technical term. So you can find out a lot of interesting things by simply looking at this chart. Now, you may have noticed, if you're paying a lot of attention, this word up here, moiety. We will talk about that later, but I will give you a hint and say that the colors red and blue have to do with membership in moieties, right? So here's a red one, here's a blue one. Moieties are something we will talk about later, but they're pretty interesting. You may have also noticed that they have names for these generation groups, kind of like we do, millennials, Generation X, so on and so forth. But again, because they're really into age rankings, this is really important for them. Right? I don't have to give you a whole lecture on these people. Instead, you can look at a kinship chart and you can figure out a lot of interesting things from them. That's why anthropologists are all about them. They're a really good way to summarize a kinship system, and you can learn a lot with one simple figure. Okay, check out the next lecture on kinship. We'll go over quite a few terms. Anthropologists really like making up terms for kinship systems, but don't focus too much on memorizing them. Keep in mind that everything in this class is relatively open note, open internet in terms of sourcing, so don't spend a lot of time memorizing the terms, but you should learn them and how they work. Anyway, check out that lecture next.